All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rakah Kadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much respect to the brothers laboring in this truth worldwide to wake up the elect of the children of Israel. It's your brother Dawadai coming at you with another lesson. Lord willing is edifying and comforting to the saints. Shalom, brother. Shalom, GMS Kabar Dama. Shalom. Yahweh Shah Shah Brakatah. So this lesson is basically going to be on the history of Israel crying out in the time of Esther and Mordecai. All right? Because, you know, whatever was written aforetime was written for our learning. Matter of fact, let's get that. Let's get that right quick before we jump into the lesson. All right, let's go to Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we, through patience and comfort of the scriptures, might have hope. All right, so these things that were written aforetime was written for what? Our learning. That we, through patience, right, and comfort of the scriptures, might have hope, all right? And, you know, we had certain times in our history that we cried upon Yahweh Shah to save us, all right? And Purim is one of those times, all right? Because whoever called upon Yahweh Shah, right, and was confounded, right? As a matter of fact, let's go get that. Let's go to the book of Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, chapter 2 and verse 10. Look at the generations of old and see, did ever any trust in the Lord and was confounded? Or did any abide in his fear and was forsaken? Or whom did he ever despise that called upon him? Yeah. So right now, we're in the time of calling upon our Lord and Savior, Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, right? We're in the time of coming back to our power, right? So he's gradually hearing our cry, just as in the time of Esther and Mordecai, right? Matter of fact, let's get one more precept before we jump into the lesson or into the history, right? Let's go to the book of Hosea, chapter 5 and verse 15. I will go and return to my place till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, they will seek me early. So in our affliction, us coming back to our heritage, guess what? We're seeking Yahweh Shai 10 times harder, all right? We seeking him because we're tired of this captivity. And basically, we're ready to go home, all right? So let's go to the book of Esther. And I'm going to start at chapter 2. Might be a lot of reading, but, you know, it's all for labor of love, right? I'm going to start at verse 21. This is Esther chapter 2 and verse 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigdan and Terkesh, of those who kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. Now Esther became queen because Ahasuerus' first queen did not want to obey the commandment of the king when he asked her to come. and his counselors came to him and said, hey, man, you need to put this woman away, because if she defiles you, she's going to be an example to all the other women, in your kingdom, that they can defile the men, right? So he ended up putting her away. He had fair virgins from all over his province come through, all right? And he chose Esther, all right? Verse 23, and when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. All right. So when these things was found out, Salakia, was always get dry when you when you start to do a lesson. Okay. So once these things was found out by the king, they interrogated these guys and found out the matter was true. And once they found out the matter was true, they made inquisition, and they end up hanging these men, right? Chapter 3. After these things did Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So this Agagite, Haman, is what? He's an Edomite, all right? And what did the Lord say? He was going to have, matter of fact, more than just an Edomite, he was a Amalekite. The Lord said he's going to have war with Amalek, right? From generation to generation. See, we back in that same time, man, that these same spirits are back, and they hate us, all right? They hate that we coming back to our nationality. They hate that we proclaiming that we the children of Israel, all right? So these things that were written aforetime is just going to re-happen again, all right? And as we crying out to our God, he's going to hear our cry, just like before. And all the king's servants, verse 2, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, right? So we already know that these nations are against us, right? So we're not going to bow down. We weren't supposed to serve nobody but Yahweh Shah, right? Same thing with Daniel, all right? It says, then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? And it came to pass, when they spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, and to see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, for he had told them he was a Jew, right? So all the history of the Amalekites and the Israelites, when we came out of Egypt, they ain't let us pass. The Amalekites raided King David and took his wives, right? So the history of us and the Amalekites, has been long standing, right? It says, verse 5, and when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. Yeah, so Haman, as all these proud devils are, he was upset because one of our forefathers did not show him reverence, all right? And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai, right? In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad, and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws, therefore it is not for the king's prophets to suffer them. See, this devil, he had a problem with Mordecai, but he in turn tried to make it reflect unto the children of Israel. And what did he use? The occasion that he used was our laws, all right? The thing that made us perfect. That's why, or the things that made us holy, all right? That's why you read how in the Apocrypha, how the Greeks wanted us to discontinue from calling ourselves Jews, right? And how they didn't want us to do our sacrifices, want us to sacrifice swine, right, onto the altar. So these people always have the same game plan, all right? And Haman said unto the king, okay, we just read that. Verse 9, if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of business to bring it into the king's treasures. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. You see that? And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, and people also to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Right? So this devil was ready to take out all of the children of Israel within that province, right? It says, then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of the king Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. And the copy of the writing for a commandment was given to every province, was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. So this devil sent out letters to the enemy of the Israelites, basically, to be ready to take out men, women, and children, right? Old and young. Verse 15, the post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Right? So the whole city was like, why was this decree sent out? What reason would it be for these people to be destroyed on this particular day? Right? And Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakadash, Barakatham to all the brothers and sisters on the comment board, Shalom. Right? So we're going into the history of Purim. You know, just a slight history lesson. You know, for when we called upon Yahweh Shai, he answered us. All right? So this is chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and a bitter cry. What are the men of the Lord doing out on the highways and byways, man? They got on sackcloth and were groaning and were crying to Yahweh Shah for all the abominations that's done in the midst of her. Matter of fact, let's get that. All right. You know, whatever was written aforetime was written for our learning. This is Ezekiel chapter 9 and verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry, right? For all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. See that? So the same thing that Mordecai did. He rent his clothes. He put on sackcloth, right? He went to cry bitterly because of what the thing that was transpiring against his people, right? You know, that's what we're doing. We're in that same state. We're crying bitterly. Lord, get us out of this captivity. Lord, come back and save us, right? Verse 2. And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate, clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. You see that? So it just wasn't Mordecai, man. It was the nation of Israel, you know. They say Jews here. You know, it definitely could be other Israelites, you know what I'm saying? Because we was all scattered. So we was crying unto Yahweh Shah, man. Just like the hopeful elect is coming back now, crying to Yahweh Shah, man, these same things are playing out over and over again. All right? So Esther's maid and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther for Hakah, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hakah went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasurers for the Jews, to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. And Hatak, and Salaki, if I'm not pronouncing his name correct, came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake with Hakak, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's province do know that whatsoever, whether a man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out a golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. So she let him know that it was a decree by the king. If anybody were to come in under him without being called, it was going to be put to death unless he puts out his gold scepter, right? And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. He was letting you know, hey, don't think that you just because you with the king that you're going to be able to escape this affliction. And that's what, a lot of our people think. They think that they going to escape being persecuted because they follow the ways of, Esau, right? They think that this money is going to be able to save them from this impending destruction that's coming. The only thing that's going to be able to save you is Yahweh Bashar Shai, right? Verse 14. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such as time as this? Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish, right? So she asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews that were in that province and to fast with her 3 days and 3 nights, right? As you fasting, you're afflicting your soul, and you get closer to Yahweh Bashar Shai because you're conquering your flesh. You're limiting, your intake as far as food, because you're trying to get closer to Yahweh Bashar Shai. Same thing Ezra did, right? When he saw those visions, he fasted, right? So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him, right? And you brothers are rolling in the spirit. Beautiful, beautiful precepts. Lord willing, I get to read some of them. All right, this is chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given, it shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. He's like, what do you want? You can have even up to half this kingdom. What do you want, right? See, that's the favor that Yahweh Bashar Shai has bestowed upon her because of the diligence that she and the Israelites in that province had showed fasting those 3 days and 3 nights, right? And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said. And then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Hey man, ain't that a lot of pride, man? Don't that sound like old Donald Trump the day, I was acquitted? And that sounds like a lot of pride to me, man. Haman said, moreover, Esther, the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai, Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. This guy had real hatred for Mordecai, right? Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high. Now get this, man. This idea was the idea of his wife and his friends, that gallows be made for Mordecai, right? And tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. See that? That's something that I did not realize, that suggestion came from his wife and his friends. All right. Chapter 6. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. Now remember, we just read in chapter 2 how Mordecai had let the king know that 2 of his men wanted to put him to death, right? And this was written where? In the Chronicles, right? And it was found written that Mordecai had told Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. So the Most High calls the king, he controls everything, man. Matter of fact, let's get a precept right quick. Let's get a precept. The Most High controlled, King Ahasuerus, that where he would not get any sleep. And he just so happened to have him, request, the chronicles of things that were done, right? This is Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, Yahweh Shah. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Right? So whatever Yahweh Shah wanted to go on, guess what? It went on. Right? It said, and the king said, what honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai. Right after this was read to him, he went to the king to get his blessing to hang Mordecai. Right? Says to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? So in so much pride, this devil thought that the king was talking about him, right? It says, so Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, which is the word heart goes back to the Hebrew word lab, which means your mind, right? To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Man, hey, that's Esau personified, man, right? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, right? And the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. This devil wanted to put on the king's dress, ride the king's horse, and wear the king's crown. If that ain't Esau, I don't know what is, man. If that ain't pride personified, I don't know what is, man. Right? Verse 9. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most notable princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and to bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. See that? That's the spirit of Yahweh Shah, man. All right, he said he's going to make even your enemies your footstool, man. But this came after what the Israelites in all provinces cried unto Yahweh Shah, man. All right, the same thing that we're doing now. We're crying to our Father, you know what I'm saying, to send back our big brother to save us out this captivity, right? It says, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the city, through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning, and having his head covered. You see that? And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, for whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but thou shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlain, and hastened to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. You see that? Call lawyer, how about Shah, man? That's beautiful, man. You know, he thought he was gonna go there, you know, and get the king's blessing to hang Mordecai, but he went there and the king made him escort Mordecai in princely robes and kingly robes, right? On horseback, on the king's horse, with a crown on his head, and making him proclaim throughout all the city, thus is the man, right? Thus is this man that the king has chose to honor, right? Hey, Shalom, Yahweh Shah Barakatah, the water for coming through, brother. Shalom. So, and we gonna get a little bit more into it, you know. Ain't gonna read the whole thing. You brothers can read it, you know, at your beck and call. Let's see for a second. All right, we'll read chapter 7, and then we'll probably try and jump to the point. Yeah, I got to go to the plantation too, man, but it was on my spirit, man, to go ahead and bring this out. So, chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen, and the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. So she said, if we were going to be just sold into slavery, I wouldn't have said nothing, right? Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary, right? And the enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereupon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Yeah, man, they were about to put this dude to death, right? Then Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hang Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath was pacified. Now keep in mind that he's still shalom to the brothers and sisters on the comment board. Shalom. Shalom, elder. Yahweh Shah Barakatah. Shalom. So, you know, he was taken in his own devices, all right? The same thing that happened then is the same thing that's going to happen now. he's going to be taken in his own devices, right? Let's go to chapter 8. And on that day, now keep in mind, the queen still hasn't had her request answered, or she hasn't had her request made known to the king. And on that day, did King Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. You see that? So we're going to be set once again over the house of Esau, right? And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device, see that he had devised against the Jews, right? Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I being pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammadath, and Salaki on the pronunciation, the Agagite, right, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hands upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring, for the writings which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. So he couldn't reverse the thing that Haman had sent out, but he could write a new decree, right? Then were the king's scribes called, then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and the province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. You see that? So Yahweh Shah, he turned that thing all the way back around, man. But why did he do it? Because the children of Israel afflicted themselves in mourning and sackcloth and crying to their God, right? Crying out to their power. All right? So these things that were written aforetime was written for our learning. All right. So we know that when we cry out, when we remember ourselves, he's going to fight for us, man. And that's what's been going on. Little by little, he's been visiting the world which he made, right? Verse 12. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them, man. They wanted to convert, man. All right? They wanted to try and keep our custom. All right? And we're going to go back to that. All right? Because, it said the nation that will not serve you will utterly perish. Right? So when they see the power, once again, the Yahweh Shah coming through the men of Israel, guess what? It's a lot of them going to bow down. It's a lot of them going to have that rod struck on their head. Right? Let's see what we got here. All right, so I'm going to read. I want to get to the point. Let's see. I'm going to read this chapter, and I encourage you, brothers and you sisters, to continue to read on. Because this is a powerful story in our history about how Yahweh Shah, answered the cry of his people. And he's going to do it again. All right? Like, things were written aforetime for our comfort. Matter of fact, let's get this one more time. Because, whoever trusted in Yahweh Shah was confounded, right? This is Ecclesiastes or Sirach chapter 2 and verse 10. Look at the generations of old, and see, did ever any trust in the Lord and was confounded? Or did any abide in his fear and was forsaken? Or whom did he ever despise that called upon him? You see that? So during this time, we called upon the Lord. We was in his fear. All right? We feared him. All right? We fasted. We put on sackcloth. All right? And we made ourselves lowly, man. All right? And we're doing that again. All right? Because that's the spirit that he put on us. All right? To the hopeful elect. So let's read this chapter. This is Esther chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemy of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had ruled over them that had hated them. See that? Hey, just go read Psalms 83, right? And the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, to lay hold on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. You see that? Don't we read in Revelations, they stood upon their feet at a exceedingly great army, and those who saw them, fear fell upon them, right? And all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants And the deputies and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Yahweh Shai has always, put great men, even when we were in captivity, Daniel, Joseph, right? He exalted certain men to look after the welfare of the children of Israel, right? Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan the palace the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Salakia, we're going to try and get through these words. And Dalphon, and Apaitha, and Porotha, and Amada, and Aredatha, and Salakia. I'm gonna guess we're gonna go past those words. We're gonna jump to verse 10. And the king's son of Haman and the son Hamadiah, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid not their hand. They ain't take any of their goods, right? On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace. And the 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan. And they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand, right? But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they had laid not their hands on the prey, right? On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day of the same rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. So that's where we get the day Purim from, all right? It's a 2-day, it's not a high holy day. It's just a holy day, of us commemorating when Yahweh Shai delivered us out of the hands of our enemies, right? But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day thereof of the same, they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month a day of gladness and feasting and a good day, and sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote all these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly. All right. That's going to be it for the lesson. Lord willing, it's been edifying and confident to the saints, to the hopeful elect. Lord willing, coming to you with another lesson. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakah Kadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who I'm learning this 100% truth from, who woo well, who teach well. Much respect to the brothers laboring worldwide to wake up the elect of the children of Israel. Once again, coming to you another lesson, Lord willing. Till the next time, I say shalom.